And then, of course, a bunch of hardware. There's piles of phones on my desk and all kinds of things. So I learned a ton of things. Some of the more significant things that I learned is big problems are worth solving. It sometimes seems not worth it to try to take a big, abstract idea and spend a couple of years solving it. That's hard for some people to consider. But I can tell you that the payoffs are good. This has blossomed into a legitimate business. I'm sure it will provide for a lot of folks in the not too distant future. In only 2 years, there's some significant success in terms of traffic, and I'll talk about that in one sec. After a quick list of thank yous, my wife, Lynn, is amazing. It'll be 19 years this year, and she's tolerated my enthusiasm for every one of them. It's awesome. My children, Austin and Paige. Paige was able to make it. She cut school today to come out here and hang out. My business partner. Oh, what is going on here? I'm clicking. I'll stop. My business partner, Stephen. You talk about patience. It's expensive to explore, and when your partner decides he's going to go off and go back to college and play with the kids, what a great guy to allow me to not only do that, but to support me along the way like no one else has. Kevin Cagle, my advisor, tremendous. My classmates, 25,000 people helping me online. I'll talk about that real fast, and then I'll be done. The success of this, it's pretty amazing. About 15,000 people, 15,000 different people a month are using the site. They're visiting the site about 30,000 times in a month. There's tens of thousands of mobile applications powered by this back end now. Some of them are for profit, some of them are for charities. There's all kinds of things. All different kinds of phones, all over the world. It's about 80 countries now. And it's a capstone from CSUMB, right? Part of that success, of course, is there's nothing for sale on the site. It's free. So certainly that has something to do with the excitement and the traction, but we'll change that soon enough. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm on. So we can do that. Do what? Yeah, so I have a PDF I want to put up. Am I going to be doing the next hour? Is that how we're... Okay, so I'm going to plug my computer in. I don't normally have prepared presentations. You know, there's the change is good or whatever the title is that I titled this thing on the slide. I'll just get up here and talk for an hour, but I thought, I should probably put something on the screen. But I'm definitely not a click through slide by slide kind of guy. And so we'll leave the pictures up there for a little while, so we have something to look at if you get bored listening to me. So let me plug this in.
Whatever cable you need. What do you need?
I need that little mini Mac DVI thing.
DVI?
I don't know what it's called. It's in my bag over there. That one? Yeah, but this won't go here. Oh, you go to here?
That's how I did it, yeah.
We're going 4 connections here. It's like a train we're building. Choo-choo train.
Well, I have what you want, but it's plugged into that one over there.
Yeah. So yeah, we're good. This will work. We'll just hang it off the side here. There's one in my backpack that takes away all these connections. So let's see if we can get the screen up on the computer there. So what's the title on the little schedule there? Change is good? Is that what it's called? A lot of you guys have heard me talking in the forums and talking in the webinars, and I don't seem to have what's going on here, about this idea, and I talked a little bit about it last night. My computer's black. See, that's not what I prepared right there. I actually have something to show you, but
You have my laptop.
I don't know. Do I have stickers on here? Oh, that's not even me, dude. That's not even all these damn Macs around. Where's mine?
Mine has a black screen as well.
Where is? Oh, it's right here. I got a bunch of stickers on the front of mine. I'm a hack.
Size different.
I was like,
You're
it's
the big
small.
boy.
Who's this guy? Okay, here we go. Fun stuff. If you don't have stickers on your Mac, you're smart, because when you take them off, they leave spots. But I like to personalize. So anyway, I dropped my little mic.
What's the wireless password, gents, ladies? 9600. 9600.
Yes. Not 96.
Is that Warren's or Comfort?
Whoa, crazy resolution. Let me get this smaller here. Quick, pop quiz. How do I change a resolution on my computer? Anybody know? Preferences, displays. I'm so not a hardware guy. It's probably open and I can't find it. Here it is. Somebody want to choose a resolution for us?
You should have 2 displays. One's the absent, which you got there.
There we go. We'll run with that. We'll go view full screen. We'll be good. Why not? Oh, I'm looking here instead of up there. See there?
Get your second display up and mirror the displays.
1024, you said? By 768? Seeing nothing. Maybe it's the 6 Frankenstein wires thing we have here.
There's a whole bunch of geeks in the room. Anybody got a cable?
I know, huh?
Chris does.
And we don't know how to change the resolution either.
Here you go. Let's do something.
Nope.
Try. I know it will do 720p. 720p is an option.
Not in the list. Oh, there it is. In the list. Nothing. Oh, wow. Look at it's all freaking out, though.
Yeah, sometimes you have to unplug it. Plug it back in.
That's like my cable at home. Any ideas, people? Different connector?
Yeah, I think it's connected.
Yeah, use different connector.
I got a Thunderbolt VGA.
Thunder, whatever. I don't. There's no thunder or anything in the side of this thing. Let me get mine, the one I've used for years. Yeah, it looks just like that. Perfect. That was quite the extension cord. That's what happens when you plug like all your Christmas lights into one extension cord. Everything starts blinking on you, and your neighbors get scared. Everybody freaks out.
They're trying to find which light bulb's out.
Yeah, exactly. That's what teenagers are for.
We know they got that
So we have a blue screen. Okay. So let me go full screen here. Find our document. It's hiding. Yeah, so I put this document together last night in the hotel room because I thought it would be better to have something to look at. So change is good. We're going to talk about, I mean, it's pretty simple to say that. It's easy to say, yeah, change is a good thing. Don't worry about it. It's no big deal. Deal with it. But in reality, it's generally very threatening for all of us. Not just in computers, right? I mean, coming here, everything. Every time something changes in our work, in our family, or whatever, it gets really, really challenging. I've got some family pictures up here to talk about this idea. Long before we get to computer talk. Paige and Austin, my kids, this is 10 years ago. I think it says 03. Some of you might recognize this van. My wife and I and the kids are always in this van going on these crazy trips. The van still exists. Speaking of change, that thing has not changed a bit. It's always been an old beater van, and it's still a beater van. But Paige and Austin, as kids, have to deal with change too. And I think it's an interesting discussion to look back a little bit and as it relates to my kids, but probably your kids too, when they have to face these interesting changes. New teachers, new schools, in some families, new parents maybe, right? Hardcore stuff. And all of it is just little bits of change each day that they're always dealing with. So Paige and Austin want to jump off this rock. And that's out in front of our house in Monterey. And they climb up on this rock. And they don't jump off. And they come back and they say, Dad, I want to jump off this rock. And we jump off the rock. I said, I don't know, how deep's the water? I have no idea. It's probably not a good idea. So Paige, the older one, says, well, it's generally not very deep, but sometimes it changes. Sometimes it gets really deep. And little brother says, well, maybe that's when we should jump. I said, well, I don't know. Is it deep enough when it gets really deep? So you see, it's constantly changing. We go there, we hang out, throw rocks at the birds, we look down, and sometimes it's 1 foot deep, sometimes it's 10 feet deep. So if we jumped right at the right time, we took advantage of that change, and she's telling me that she's a kid, then I think we'll be good. Of course, and I hear the mom say, don't jump off the rock. I don't care how deep it is or whatever. So sure enough, I said, yeah, if you think it's deep enough, and if you think you can jump at the right time, when it changes, go ahead. So they did. And I took a picture of them. And they flew off of there, and they ended up jumping off this rock like 50 times. But each time they jumped, it took about 15 minutes for it to be just right. And they'd stand up there and they'd watch, and they'd pay attention, and water would fly, and they'd jump off. And so now that sounds kind of crazy and kind of nerdy, but a lot of the stuff that we deal with, I call them change agents, in technology can be really, really threatening if the timing's not right, or really, really relieving and good and happy and yay, the change. You wanted that change. And so I like to embrace change as always a good thing. This little picture here will probably make you laugh. iPhone 4, iPhone 5, iPhone 6, iPhone 7, iPhone 8. And it's just kind of a joke that I stole from Google or whatever. But we're just going to park it on this slide and kind of have a conversation about these change agents. Because sometimes it's good to think about what's changing in a more detailed way as it relates to making apps and code and all that kind of stuff. So most of it can be broken down into 6 different things. The tools change that we use, we deal with that all the time. Xcode will change from 3.9 to 3.95 to 3.97, and it changed last night. I mean, I like to think that my computer's completely modern. I get home, it's still home. I get upstairs, it's midnight. I log in, Xcode changed. I don't know if anybody knew that, but it's different now. I didn't get the new one, but I need to do that. So the developer tools change all of the time. Hardware changes. My phone changes, your phone changes, our iPads change. New gadgets come out. That's generally the hardest part to deal with as a developer, is how to deal with the new hardware. We'll get back to that in a little bit. Software changes constantly. App Store. I mean, there's thousands of new apps all of the time. And of course, with each new app, our jobs as developers or as aspiring developers or teachers or whatever also changes. You know, the bar tends to get raised constantly with each new batch of apps. I think it's 5,000 applications a day that Apple's reviewing, and that rate it's extraordinary how the pace of change has taken this App Store to what it is in just a few short years. That CSUMB speech I did a few years ago, I think the App Store had 100,000 apps or something. Like when I met a lot of you guys, 200,000 maybe. I mean, some of us remember those numbers. Who can throw out the lowest number they saw in a media report about the App Store? Like, does anyone remember a media report or a news, article that said the App Store reached 50,000? Does anybody remember that? No? Okay, I remember some low numbers. It was pretty amazing. The expectations, we just talked about that, but that's a big one too. The people who buy the software, the people who buy the phones, the people who buy the developer tools, the people who consume these technology products, their expectations change really fast. 1.4, we know what Buzztouch 1.4 was, a pretty simple app builder to make an application pretty quickly that worked. There's an argument that says that's no longer adequate. Right? It's a pretty basic thing. It's useful and it's certainly viable in a lot of situations, but overall, all of our expectations have changed. We want flashier, faster, smoother, more sophisticated, but simpler, more beautiful experiences. I think we can all relate to that if you looked at the initial first apps versus now. Markets mature and change. That's mostly related to people who are doing this for a living, making apps for a living. But as the market changes, which is a little bit different than the end users changing or the software changing, market changes are generally related to price. Everything was $1 when the App Store first started. Now there's $10 apps as a normal thing. Right? So markets tend to change and how that affects you, positively, negatively, or whatever. And your competitors change. This is a big one. I'd like to think that we're not competing with each other in the app space, but we kind of are. There's lots of developers that are competing to make the same things that you're making or make an improvement to an application that maybe exists already. One of the biggest compliments that you'll hopefully experience someday, or frustrations, depending on how you perceive all of this stuff, is when someone takes an application you've made and makes it better. They take an application that you've made and they've made it better. I'd say that'd be better than taking an application you've made and made it worse, right? But I think we kind of secretly wish that they failed to make my app better because, after all, we did it as good as we could, right? But that's a good thing. I know that's crazy, but if somebody out there is going to take your app and copy it and make it better, it's probably a sign of something else, and we'll get to that too. But so let's back up a little bit and just kind of revisit this list and talk about, how can we perceive, the idea that how we perceive these changes as good or bad really shapes the overall effect that it has. If you think that when Xcode changes, it's bad, you're going to have a really hard time making apps and making software. But most of us do. I had that reaction. A little alert came up last night, and I went, oh, because it just probably means that I've got to make some adjustments that I don't want to make. And so sometimes it's because I don't have the time, sometimes because the time isn't right. Maybe I wanted to make them in a few weeks, but I don't get to decide that stuff. And so why worry about it? And now I just have the frame of mind that when Xcode is updated, I update my computer and I compile my project, and if it's full of warnings or whatever, I deal with it. And so how we deal with this stuff, when a customer calls you and says, your app doesn't work on my phone, you could think that that's negative. You could perceive that as bad. Oh gosh, I got to get my code configured for the 3-inch by 1-inch screen that's on a watch now, or whatever the change is. Or you can think of that as an opportunity to maybe sell to a larger market, or maybe satisfy a larger market. And so it's just that change in perception that will really, I think, oftentimes have a dramatic impact on your success and overall this whole thing. And so with all of these change agents, I encourage you guys to always try to forget about the bad part of the change and try to look at the opportunity side and the good side. And there's opportunities that you might not realize that aren't readily evident. I'll give you another perfect example. Let's say that you do, this is speaking to people who are making apps for hire, and I know a lot of us aren't, but some people are. Say a customer gives you $1,000 to make him an app, Trish's fitness app or whatever. She buys your time and your skill and your professionalism to make an app. When a new device comes out that app doesn't work on, that's good. She'll hire you again to make another app for that device. That's a good thing. That's not a disappointing thing, unless you failed to communicate that in the beginning properly and you said this will work on everything forever and all time. which sounds silly, but when you don't talk about it effectively in the beginning and accurately and honestly and transparently with the client in the beginning, that's what they heard you say, even though you didn't say it. Their assumption is this is just going to work. I've got an app. And they're going to tell Granny to download it on her $4 tablet she got at Walmart, and it isn't going to work, and it's going to be your fault. Not because you didn't program for Grandma's tablet, but because you didn't talk about it. You didn't bring that up. You didn't raise that as part of the conversation. So quickly, you might be thinking, that's not an opportunity, that's a nightmare. I've lived that nightmare, and I've had that argument. But I'm telling you, I don't have that argument. Because I tell them in the beginning, I'm going to make an app, and this is what's going to work on, and things are going to change, and you're going to need me in 6 months. It's just part of the process. And so if you're open and transparent and honest about that, every single time a change does occur, it's an opportunity for you. It's an opportunity to maybe make some more money. It's an opportunity to solidify that relationship. Right? You want these touch points with the client so that they don't go hire someone else, which could happen. All of these opportunities to meet with these people on a regular basis, either on the phone or an email or in person, they're important. They're really important. That's not just computer stuff. That's just customer, professional stuff. What happens when the prices change and the market matures? You can say that's bad. My app that I used to only get 99 cents for, now no one's buying it because I have to, I raised the price to $5 because it looks like the market will support that, but less people are buying it. Right? And so how many less people? Do you really know? I mean, would you rather sell 10 $5 apps or 21 apps? I'd rather take the 10 folks that'll pay me $5 than the 20 people that'll pay me $1. So it's good that you get these opportunities to make these adjustments and to kind of go through this change. I think the biggest problem for our community are the tools. I think the biggest problem are the tools. And when the tools change, because, and this is hard from my perspective, but Buzztouch itself and the site and the community itself is one of those tools. So that's something, that's like a layer that has potential change and changes fast. I change things oftentimes with no warning. And I'll put something in the forum and I'm like, I probably shouldn't have done that. Right? I probably shouldn't have done that. If I did New Year's resolutions, one of them would be, I need to get more structured and more skilled at planning these changes and things. Yeah, I'm just not good at that. I mean, I'm trying to do that. We're trying to do that. We now have, it's not just me anymore. So it's on my to-do list to try to get better than that because you guys deserve that, right? I really doubt that Xcode that changed last night, I really doubt that a guy at Apple yesterday went, oh, I'm going to change this. Push it, right? It doesn't happen that way. But we're a small little group of people and we're trying to evolve and it's always a big balance. But the idea that the site changes and the tools on the site change, the idea that the compilers change, the idea that the plugins change, the idea that the App Store submission process changes, the idea that sometimes, believe it or not, something changes that nobody even expects. That, for example, the carrier changes. Maybe you have an application that's video-centric and all of a sudden everybody on Verizon can't use your app because they're going to have to pay or something because there's a new bandwidth rule. It's never ending. It's never, ever ending. And so if I had an application that sucked a lot of bandwidth and my happy customers couldn't use it one day because the rules in Verizon's, account plans or something changed, I'd be happy because my default position is change is good. Okay, it's cool, something's changing. Why would I be happy about this? I don't know, let's figure this out. Maybe I need to make a better app more efficiently that downloads faster, that gives a better experience that I could have done at the beginning, but I didn't because I had this kind of crutch of a big bandwidth allowance and it didn't matter. But now I've got an opportunity because somebody made me make a better piece of software. And ultimately I'm better off because I've got a more efficient app, the customers can still use it. And so every single time something changes in any of these environments, I immediately think, cool, where's the opportunity? How am I gonna benefit? How's the customer gonna benefit? How much time is it gonna take me? All that kind of stuff. And so, where's our time? Do we have a clock in here? We're halfway through. Okay, cool. So I want to hear from some of you guys, what's the worst thing that changes? Just a couple different perspectives so we can talk about that idea. And I have some suspicions, but I need a volunteer. Somebody hand up. Chris, what's the worst thing that drives you crazy that when it changes?
So a recent example, I made an app for Fiverr.
Okay.
Use PHP.
I'm going to interrupt you. Does everybody know what Fiverr is? $5. You post, I'll do something for $5, and then somebody buys that for $5. Okay, perfect.
Yeah. So I make an app for it. I use PHP to parse their website and feed it into my app. And of course, to buy any of the Fiverr stuff, I direct them to the full website. But I use all the JSON manipulation to have the cool plugins and all that. A week after I get the app in the market, Fiverr makes a change to their website and breaks my entire script, and now all my users are complaining that the app doesn't work and crashes as soon as they open it.
Right. So nightmare, right?
Yeah,
You're out of
yeah.
business. This thing doesn't work. Do you know? I mean, we can take this pretty technical. It
Sure,
sounds like
yeah.
we'll need to. I would imagine that the changes related to this data that you were getting, maybe
Yeah,
the
so
field names changed or
Well,
something.
no, it wasn't even
Structure?
that. It was they've somehow made a change where the main content comes in a separate thread than the main website, and so that when I go to pull their website data, I only get half of it, and I miss all the content. And so,
And that wasn't the case a week ago.
right, yeah.
And so the data that you're pulling from Fiverr, are you allowed to be doing this, or are you kind of sneaking it out of there?
Yeah.
Sneaking it out of there? Right, so the lesson is, the opportunity is, you probably knew in the beginning that, hey, this might not be a long-term plan,
Right.
because I shouldn't be doing this anyway. So I'm going to kind of get away with it a little bit, which we all in programming do these kinds of things. We take the liberties sometimes of, pushing our motive forward, kind of not considering all these things. And I would bet now that Jace, the change, have they now publicized this feed?
Of course not. No. Yeah.
So what did they change exactly? They changed the site, or because they do have an API now.
Okay.
So where I was going to go with this is the good is now you can do it.
Yeah.
You just can't legally, properly, probably faster, better, more data, but you got to change your code because you didn't do it that way to begin with.
Yeah. See, so I don't know if they changed because of their API that's coming out, or if
Probably.
they changed because they saw my app. I mean, there was only one other Fiverr app on the market, and it was terrible, and so that was I said, hey, opportunity. And
So the takeaways from this, though, is Chris couldn't control this. He had no control over Fiverr changing it, right? He had no, but what he can control is the other end of the experience. And I think I'm like fundamentally against doing things that aren't published like okay and promoted. And so I don't have a whole lot of sympathy for things that break that are kind of sneaky, I guess, or when we take those liberties or whatever. So he probably couldn't have done a whole lot in advance without the API that's now available. So there's not a whole lot he could have done. But he does now have to figure out where the opportunity lies and maybe make the best Fiverr app with this new allowed public information, which is an opportunity. Because if you could, that place is busy.
Sure.
And if you make the best one legally, you can stand to make a lot of money. I thought I was going to hear compiler problems. I know Tim struggles with those. It's yeah, the versions and the warnings. I want to talk a little bit about the yellow squiggly lines in Xcode. Right, you see these. Everybody, who's Xcode here? Who's iPhone developing here? Any Android only? 2 Android onlys? Both? Any boths? Who's doing both? Everybody's doing both? Okay. For those who are unaware, Xcode will put a little yellow squiggly line under your code when it's warning you about something. It'll put a little red line under your code when it's saying this is not going to work and it's going to break, meaning we can't compile it. Right? So you hit the compile button, which for those who don't quite understand what that means, it means take all of the files in my project and scrunch them down into one thing. That's how you explain compiling. There's a whole computer science degree on compilers, but that's in essence what happens. Let's take 500 files and make them one. So the compiler can't do that when there's a red line in your project. And so the red ones are generally the easiest ones to fix because it's something that's so broken. If Xcode knows it's broken and you don't know it's broken, that's great. That's Xcode helping you. Because it's not going to work this way. And so Xcode's almost like a little inspector that you didn't have to hire, who's going to look through all of your files and all of your source code in the Buzztouch world you probably didn't write very much of. It's probably someone else's plug-in or core project or something. But the yellow lines are the trickier ones. The red ones you just have to fix them. The yellow lines are warnings. And a lot of people aren't sure what to do with these warnings. I get emails all the time. I'm being warned. I'm being warned. And we need to have a little bit of a discussion about what that means and why that warning is there. They're normally called deprecation warnings, or code has been deprecated. Do you know what that means? Deprecated? Tell us what it means. Depreciated, I'm sure that would work, but tell us what depreciated code is, because that's like an accounting term, I think. But we'll take it.
Read that word, I was like, depreciate? I was like, that's not depreciate. So now I'm now I call it depreciated.
Okay.
And I'm right.
Okay.
You're wrong.
It's fine. We'll take the I out of my, or pulled an I in mine.
Something's been updated, and of course, some files have become not obsolete, but
Perfect.
it will still work sometimes.
Yep.
But there's no need to.
Yeah, or it won't work in the future, right? And so one thing that what I kind of strive for, and I hope to do one day, is be able to tell you in your Buzztouch project that this might be going away. So a deprecation warning is just a warning. In this case, it's almost always Apple because it's Xcode. They're saying this method or this code that you can now use that will do this routine or this function or load this map or spin this view or whatever that code line does, you're not going to be able to do that anymore. And so, okay, when am I not going to be able to do that anymore? Right? When will it stop? And I actually get emails that sound something like this. I compiled my app. It's in the App Store. It's on customers' phones. And I'm really worried because there's a bunch of deprecated code in it, and I don't know when their phones will break. In other words, they think that their app's going to stop working at some given date, which is very weird to me, because that isn't how it works. The deprecated warnings are only related to your compiler. They're only related to what you asked Xcode to do. Inspect my code, compile it into one little file called a binary or an app. Once it's on the device, the fact that that code is deprecated it doesn't have any meaning. It doesn't mean anything. And so that's a misconception. And we could talk for hours about the technical things behind that, but you're only worried about your ability to compile it. And of course, your ability to install it on the device.
That's the same as Android.
Absolutely.
You're going to get some warnings that really, the errors that you worry about. And the warnings are just telling you, hey, you may want to double check this.
Totally.
It's hard coded or
Mhm.
something. But once you compile it, and put it on the store,
You're finding that it's generally okay.
yeah, the customers do not see the warnings.
Right.
So
there's a lot of meaning behind that warning stuff, but in the context of this discussion, where is the opportunity in that? Where's the opportunity in that warning? And so there's really two. There's one is it's an opportunity to learn about what Apple in this case, or Android or whatever, what they're thinking, right? What are they considering changing? And oftentimes just kind of expanding on that idea, it's fun to try to guess, like where are they going to be in 6 months? If they're taking this out, there must be a reason. Why would they take this maps thing out? And a lot of the press that we see with these leaked stories, and we can talk about iOS Maps as a classic example. Before iOS Maps came out and they were using Google Maps on iPhone, months before everyone was talking about iOS Maps is going away. Now, how would they know that? How would they know that Google Maps is leaving and iOS Maps is coming? How would they know that Google Maps is going away if you're just a developer? Do they have some secret? Are they listening in Cupertino? I mean, I doubt it. Apple's pretty tight-lipped about this stuff. Well, if you pay attention to the deprecation warnings and you copy the thing and paste it in Google and do a little research, it's amazing what you'll find. And if you look at the documents in Apple, they will tell you. The only reason they would deprecate something is if it's going to be removed. So if that happens 4 months in advance, it's not a lot of speculation to say, looks like Apple Maps is coming. It's pretty obvious stuff. And so paying attention to those warnings now becomes maybe a competitive advantage for you as a developer because you know what's coming in 3 months that maybe the next person didn't. So that's an advantage and an opportunity that you have because it warned you. It's great. I get happy when I see little yellow lines because something's changing, and remember, that's good. And so I get stoked about it. Another thing that people misunderstand, your compiler in Xcode, the tool itself is extraordinarily powerful. It's far more powerful than most of us use it for. And it's a lot more powerful because it does a lot more than just compile iPhone apps. Xcode's been around a lot longer than the iPhone. It's just that no one knew about it. And no one understood what it's for. But Macs have been around for 20 years or whatever. And so this operating system, which is based on the Next computing system when Jobs came back, and I won't give you that whole history, but Xcode's been compiling Mac software for about 12 years. and it's been compiling iOS software for about 5 or 6. And so because of that, there's a lot of hidden powers and features and things that it does that are not related to mobile, not related to the touch interface, that can help us as mobile developers. And so if you go into the preferences pane, I would encourage you guys to do this, and you look at all the different choices that you can make about how your compiler works, it's pretty enlightening. You're like, I didn't know it did that. Who looks in this stuff? We don't do that. We just hit the run button. And so there's lots of stuff in the compiler settings as it relates to these warnings. And one of the things is, how detailed is it about finding the warnings? And Eclipse has like 50 of these options, because in essence, this is the same discussion for Eclipse, which is the Android compiler. There's lots of things that you can ask it to warn you about. And there's lots of things that you can ask it to ignore. And so the fact that your project is full of errors or warnings, oftentimes just related to how that installation of Eclipse is telling you about those errors and warnings. You could put it on your machine, you have no errors and warnings, and you put it on your machine, you have 50. I turned almost all that stuff on because I discover things that the compiler knows that I could never know, and I can go out and do research. It doesn't mean that I have to fix something necessarily. It doesn't mean that something's broken, but it's interesting to explore those preferences and use that compiler. It's pretty powerful stuff, right? The compiler's pretty smart. Or we're recording. I keep forgetting.
It also teaches you too.
Sure.
You know, I'll look at Eclipse and say, you know, this should not have been hard coded or something, and I look at, well, what do they mean by hard coded or something, something in that category, and then I learn. Okay, fine, I won't do that again.
Right.
But you're exactly right. My Eclipse will have nothing in it, and if I put it on Ian's Eclipse, it could have 100.
Yep. And one of the neat, funny, silly examples of this is, because remember, in our position, we generally fight off people saying, my project's broken. You know, my project's full of warnings, and that, therefore, you know, Buzztouch must be doing something wrong, or the plugin developer must not know what they're doing, or whatever, because they just don't understand the things that we understand. You can take a brand new Android project, right? The way it comes out of the box gives you some sample files and some blank stuff. Turn on all the warnings and you'll get some. Right? Brand new. Nothing in this, and it's warning me. It's that finite, or not finite, minute, you know, the differences between some of these selections. And so the takeaway from all of this is, and really the only thing I want you guys to remember and embrace, and maybe help some other people in our forum embrace, is that when something goes wrong, that's generally a good thing. I know that's hard to understand for those who don't program and they're really fighting with some of this stuff, but you're going to have to kind of take that perspective, or all of these things will leave you behind. All of these things will leave you behind, and it's not been very long that we've been doing this. And the devices in the industry, and the people in the industry, and the competitors, and the software looks entirely different today than it did just a little while ago. And a year from now, it's going to be completely different again. It's amazing how fast this stuff changes. It's unbelievable. And so the news is usually device related. Look at the new gadget, and the old one's going away. But in our world, it's always kind of software related and compiler related and related to rules. You know, what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do, and what's acceptable and not acceptable and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to make a prediction. Somebody can write this down. I don't think Apple's listening, but I wish they were. I'm a huge Apple fan. Love their products. Love everything about that company. It's my opinion that they're getting killed right now. Just getting killed. And the momentum and the curve and the feeling and the kind of the movement of this industry it feels completely different than it did if we were having this conversation a year ago. It's hard to say that, right? I mean, how can somebody that's been so dominant and maybe even, you know, invent something, arguably, how can we say that it feels like they're getting crushed? But numbers and statistics and the overall kind of undercurrent of the conversation right now, I think we would all agree that if you looked at the, you know, worldwide and all the devices and all the software and all the momentum, it's not in Apple's favor right now. So because of that, we can look forward to a more open app store. And some people will think that's good. So there's my prediction. I think in the not too distant future, the App Store will be far less restricted. And the reason I'm making that prediction is because they're going to need to. And I wish that weren't the case, because I'm a big fan of a lockdown, solid, right where the highway kind of approach versus the, open, you don't really know what you're getting kind of approach. I'm a fan of the let's make it as good as we can get it and stick to that. But I'm also a fan of open source. And unfortunately for Apple, their lack of embrace for creativity and low cost development and just kind of the openness of what Google has done and Amazon is doing and lots of other app stores around the world are doing. And now the results, I think Apple's going to have to force their hand. Do you have a question, Niraj?
Well, so along with that prediction,
Yeah.
I believe you'll be able. Along with that prediction, I believe we'll be able to run Xcode on Windows. 'Cause they
Yeah,
gotta
that's a
open
great
up that
prediction.
market.
Similar to the iTunes. It took 5 years to get
Right,
iTunes
and
on Windows.
Safari.
Great one.
Right.
Yeah, great one. And that's opportunity, right? That's change. That's good. And that's a great point. However, there will be a lot of people that are upset about it. There'll be a lot of people who won't like that idea. I just mentioned that I won't be real thrilled as a customer, as a user of iPhone. I'll be like, oh, really? Do I really need to now worry and get antivirus stuff and do all this kind of thing? But on the other hand, as a developer and as somebody in this community, I think that'll be a tremendous opportunity. Tremendous opportunity.
But do you really think, what's your opinion on that prediction?
On his prediction, Xcode running on Windows, I absolutely think that makes sense. Really? Yeah. I mean, as long as Windows maintains market share, which they're struggling with, but assuming Windows stays dominant in the PC world, then it makes sense that Xcode would run on it. Might not happen.
Right. I've seen Apple, just keep things close to the vest within their
Right.
phone. And like you said, they get impressed in the store right now.
Right, and so the same thing happened in iTunes, right? They own the whole entire digital music. Things change. They say, oh, what? By the way, iTunes on Windows now. By the way, you don't have to just get approval to be a band, to be in iTunes. Just send us your music. They used to be completely different. They used to, what did they listen to it and say, I don't like it, you can't be in our store? Kinda, right? That was kind of the way it worked in the early days. We don't like Chris's music, so he can't be in iTunes. That's not the case anymore. You can be in iTunes just by sending it to him.
$9.99 you can get that CD if you didn't get it free.
So Chris, you had another question? How's our time? 10 minutes. Uh-huh. Oh, microphone. He was recording. I keep forgetting. I'll ask the microphone to go to the question.
So in your
Yep.
what's that?
Oh, they're selling music over here for $10.
Okay, all right. In your prediction,
That was free 5 minutes ago for everybody in the room. But
in your prediction, do you see that Apple going to other manufacturers of devices like Android does? And
No.
Okay.
I don't see that happening. And the reason I say that, I mean, it could happen. I'm no disciple or whatever, but the reason I say there's no example in the past where they've tried that and it's worked. There's one example of the past where Apple's tried to do that and it hasn't worked, and they had to bring jobs back. That the company completely self-destructed when they tried to open source the manufacturing of their hardware. I don't say open source, but open it up. And the Apple customers appreciate this thing and the phone and the hardware and the product that we buy for whatever reason. Of course, there's lots of people trying to replicate that experience and think of the retail stores that are opening for Windows, and Samsung's now got a retail store and all that kind of thing. But Apple customers appreciate what they're buying, and they experimented a little bit with mainstreaming the production of the computers themselves, and it just completely flopped. But there's a few examples, iTunes is one of them, where they got more open about the software with great success. It used to be nearly impossible to make an app for a Mac. It was really hard, and they were famous for that. And they just didn't want people making software for Macs. They made it was a complete solution. And if you tried to make a software for the Macintosh, 1989, 88 or whatever, if you tried to imagine making something to make the little man, it was impossible. It just wasn't something that they embraced. So you jumped over to Windows, and Bill and his buddies are like, here's all the tools, here's everything you need, go for it. And so they completely dominated for years and years and years and years. And so obviously there's correlations and stuff, but it's just my suspicion and my hunch that the App Store's focus is going to change a little bit. And I think that they'll be more dependent on a larger number of apps as compared to the highest quality apps. Think of things like app discovery. Think of things like app search. You put a title bar in your Buzztouch app, nav bar, UI navigation bar, title equals David. You can't search that. If I go to the App Store and I search something, I'm searching app metadata. I'm not searching data within the app. Right? You can't do that. Seems like logical that you could. So if that's going to come, and if that's where everybody's headed, then of course you're now dependent on a larger number volume of apps because your business is based around that, less so than the higher quality. So it's just speculating on my part, kind of as I watch what Google's doing and what their competitors are doing to them. They're not going to have much choice. I don't think they'll just give up and stick with the status quo and watch it kind of erode. I don't think that's reasonable. So. Yeah, so I'm done. Actually, we have 5 minutes. I was going to take some questions and some discussion or whatever. My last slide here just says, watch how, this is the most sophisticated slide I'm about to show you. I stayed up an extra few minutes to make this one. So I could have just put it on there, whatever. But the kids jumping off the rock, if you guys don't have questions, I'll just burn the last 5 minutes with some entertainment. I almost went to jail for that as the dad. Apparently, there's a couple problems with that rock. One is it's not legal to jump off the rock. I didn't know this. It's a rock in the park. And where these rules come from, I don't quite understand. So the police showed up, and the tourists were pointing, and whose children have been anyway? So I said, well, I'm their dad, and I gave them the permission to jump off the rock. Well, it's not your permission to give. Police officer, big gun, tough guy. I said, what do you mean it's not your permission to get? It's not. They can't just jump off the rock. So we had a conversation, and he was upset, and he didn't like threaten to take me to jail or whatever, but told me he could. I said, well, who's going to watch the kids jump off the rock if you take me to jail? But anyways, yeah, so no, that a lot of people think that is fake. And this is in Pacific Grove, California, which is on the peninsula. There's a place called Lover's Point, and these rocks, a lot of people think they're granite. They're not all granite. They're kind of a mixture, actually. It's kind of very strange. It's one of the few parts in the world where there's like a lot of volcanic stuff that doesn't look like volcanic rock, if you remember the black kind of deal. But there's these rocks that point out. And you might see them like during the big golf tournaments at Pebble Beach or Carmel. You see it on TV. They're playing golf, the U.S. Open or the AT&T Open or whatever. This is the end of the peninsula, and you can see all the way across the bay here. This would be Santa Cruz and then San Francisco up here, 100 miles. And so this is the tip of the peninsula, and then it wraps around, and all the golf courses are on the other side. There's dozens and dozens and dozens of these rocks, and they change every day in the waves and the water, and it's very, very cool and dangerous, right? So every community's got their little rules around what you can do on their rocks or their beach or whatever. But kids are amazing. Paige is going to be in college in the fall. She's 18 now, which is nuts. So I'm going through that whole process with her, and then Austin's a sophomore in high school, and just a joy to be around. If Lynn would have jumped off, we'd have got a picture of her in here too, but she didn't jump. So I don't have anything else. Change is good, you guys. I hope you embrace it, and I'll be talking again in the afternoon, I guess, for another hour about making some money.
Have you entertained the idea of maybe a change log of what you're
I've entertained lots of stuff. And I do have little crazy little ways to keep track of things that people don't really believe, probably, because I'm a pretty random guy sometimes. But I think a log is one way to do it. If you'll notice in some of your projects, you'll begin to see the beginnings of some logic where it'll say, in your Xcode project right now, it'll say file version 3.0, file version 3.1. One of the things that, along those lines, I'd like to be able to change one file in your project. I'd like to allow you to be able to get one file. One part of the core or one part of something if you make an adjustment or things. Instead of making you get the whole project every time, we're always saying, no, just download your project. And it's this big fat project. And so it would be nice to be able to just inject something into your project for you. Think of it that way. And so there's a lot of different ideas along those lines that are related to versioning.
like something simple like with that spring building.
Uh-huh.
Had there been like a text file or something,
Exactly.
we would have known to just go in there and comment that out instead of
Exactly.
running it and it compiles and then it
Right.
crashes when you go to run it.
Right. No, it makes perfect sense. And along those lines, I mean, Chris and I talk about this stuff all the time, and there really there's an endless amount of things that we want to do. And it's become a balance of what we can all tolerate and understand and kind of move forward. I talk about injecting code. Think of it this way. You have an app that has a button on it, Chris's button. What did that button say on that plugin when we tapped it? Button 1? Go. It said go, and he hit the button. and the screen flashed and it changed into the button moved, and the nav bar changed, and the background picture changed. Logical, makes perfect sense. My mind thought, wow, wouldn't it have been cool if that button animated, if the nav bar flipped around and the image faded out and faded in. That's where my mind went, instead of just flashing into this new screen. Well, that's pretty simple stuff to make those 3 professional effects happen if you know how to do it. And a lot of us do and a lot of us don't. So it's very difficult for me, who's someone who knows how to do it, to help you in your one file that needs to be modified accomplish that. So if we can inject a file into your project that only needs 6 lines of code, that doesn't have to be recreated every time you download your project, because he has a special version of that file, wouldn't that be cool? Right? Simple things like that. And now imagine a forum where guys are making other guys' apps better, right? In a more concrete way. And so we can say that with art. We talked about art. How cool would it be if I could give you some great art to make it look better? Because I'm an artist and you're not. File versioning, it's all related to that stuff. So we can't just, keep a log, although we should. Actually, I say we can't. We probably should have a generic text file log that you guys could deal with. But I have a problem of being complex. And my mind wants to think down the road and not do the basic stuff until you know what I mean? So we're just trying to figure out how to do that properly and slowly. It's hard. I know. I've often thought, like, maybe I should just write down what I'm thinking about. But even then I'd be erasing a lot. And every single time I get in a dialogue, totally, every single time I get in a dialogue with my friends, colleagues, online, compadres, it ends up being 1,000 questions. I'm like, I can't entertain this dialogue right now for 3 weeks because it's hard. And I'm trying to figure out how to balance that so that we can all keep going forward, helping each other. Simple things like changelogs make perfect sense. Duh, right? We should have that. You're right. We should have it, but we don't. And since we don't, and it's super complicated now, it's going to take a while to figure out the right way to do it. And so, should have done that from the beginning.
You're doing the stuff in the background.
It's crazy.
And you kind of know
It's crazy.
what you did.
Yep.
And you could just test that just for developers,
Mhm.
and saying this is what I'm working on.
Right.
And somebody might have a pretty good idea to help you out on that back.
You're exactly right. And Susan has already made a tremendous amount of progress in organizing who said, I want to develop. I want to be identified as somebody who wants to nerd out and not freak out when something's broken. Right? And so that needed to be done before that's possible. Right? We can't say to this giant audience, hey, who wants to nerd out? I mean, you can, but then you get thousands of names and you don't really know anything. So it takes time. And so Sue's done an amazing job organizing, strategizing, helping me do it in a way that'll be more flexible and robust and appropriate for you guys.
So along the lines
Yeah.
of change
Uh-huh.
is...
Microphone. He needs a microphone.
So along the lines of change, there's the concept of strategy.
Yep.
And what's the vision, the roadmap. So maybe that's part of the meet you in the middle.
Absolutely.
From all your complexity to nothing.
Right.
Is meet in the middle. Is to just put out just high level, these are the things we want to achieve. You don't have to detail them out, but you're marching towards that.
Sure. It's a great idea. And why don't we take, in my next hour, after lunch or whatever, we'll kind of riff on that a little bit, because I could talk about that a long time. And really the nature of that dialogue is going to sound something like this. The hardest part for us is some of what we do, we don't want to tell anybody. So I don't say that to be mean, but I say that because it's appropriate for all of us. And we don't want some guy in never, never internet land taking all of these ideas and trying to execute on them. And all of a sudden, it's not that we're making competitors, we already do that, but it just gets distracting when you kind of paint the road for everyone else and then watch them do it and have to go back and fix it. So you're right, we should probably get better at organizing our thoughts, and we will. I like the strategy one.
That's what we were talking about yesterday. If you develop for clients, you don't want to give clients all the secrets away.
Not all clients are, some of them will do it themselves. So thanks, you guys. That was a fun hour. And hopefully the change part, hopefully it's got a meaning. This was yours. You're welcome.